Adrian Black stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. The city sprawled out like a kingdom beneath him. To the world, he was untouchable, the billionaire CEO whose every deal turned to gold, whose presence commanded silence. Yet tonight, as storm clouds bruised the sky and lightning flashed across the skyline, unease stirred inside him. The threats had started as whispers, strange emails, anonymous calls. But when his head of security found a tracker hidden in his car, Adrian realized his enemies weren't bluffing. That was when she walked in. Elena Cruz, the new bodyguard. She was nothing like the men he was used to hiring. No bulk, no bravado, just lean strength wrapped in a fitted black suit. Her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and her eyes, sharp, calculating, as if she had already mapped every escape route in the building. "You?" Adrian raised a brow. "You're supposed to protect me?" Elena didn't flinch. "If you wanted a wall of muscle, you should have hired a statue. If you want someone who keeps you alive, you hired the right person." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city below. Adrian studied her, unsettled by the quiet confidence in her stance. She didn't look afraid of him or impressed. She looked like she knew something he didn't. And for the first time in years, Adrian Black felt a shift, a crack in the armor of his untouchable life. What he couldn't see was the secret buried in Elena's steady gaze, a memory she'd carried for years. Because this wasn't the first time she had saved him. From the moment Elena Cruz stepped into Adrian Black's life, everything about his world felt different. She was a shadow at his side, moving with precision, speaking only when necessary. At business dinners, she stood in the corner, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. In the car, her gaze never left the rearview mirror, every movement calculated. She wasn't just a bodyguard, she was a fortress wrapped in silk and steel. Adrian found himself testing her. Subtle things at first, taking unplanned detours, stepping into crowded lobbies without warning. Each time, Elena adjusted without hesitation, blocking strangers, spotting threats before they even got close. She had instincts that no amount of training could explain. One evening, as rain fell in silver streaks against his penthouse windows, Adrian poured himself a drink. "You're always watching," he said, turning to where she stood near the door. "Doesn't it get exhausting?" Her voice was calm, even. "Staying alive never exhausts me. Dying does." Adrian chuckled, but her eyes never wavered. They held a depth that unsettled him, eyes that looked as though they had seen too much, carried too much. He tried to shake it off, but the thought followed him into the night. The next morning, on his way to a board meeting, Adrian's driver slowed to a crawl near a crowded intersection. That was when he felt Elena's hand clamp down on his arm, firm and urgent. "Don't move," she ordered. Seconds later, a delivery truck barreled through the red light, missing their car by inches. Adrian's chest pounded as the truck roared past. Elena released his arm slowly, her expression unreadable. For the first time in years, Adrian felt the weight of his own mortality. And when his eyes met hers, he caught something, just for a flicker. Not fear, not adrenaline, recognition. It was as though Elena knew exactly what it felt like to face death. Sleep did not come for Adrian that night. He drifted, then dropped into a memory so vivid it tasted like metal. He was 16 again, rain slashing the alley, sneakers slipping on oil, laughter behind him turning mean. A hand grabbed his collar, a knife flashed. Then a blur descended from the fire escape, a girl with long, straight hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes bright and fearless. She moved like water over stone, elbow, knee, palm. 3 men folded. "Run," she hissed, shoving him toward the street. He turned back once, just long enough to see moonlight catch on a thin scar at her collarbone. Adrian woke with a start, chest pounding. The city blinked outside, indifferent. He poured water, stared at his reflection, and heard Elena's voice from earlier, steady, unshaken.
Staying alive never exhausts me. Why did that line feel familiar? Morning brought a shareholder call and a ballroom's worth of polished smiles. Elena flowed beside him in a sleek black suit, no tie, clean collar, hair long and straight, the picture of composed strength. She guided him through cameras and courtiers with a hand at his back so light he almost didn't feel it. Almost. Between meetings, a courier arrived with an unmarked envelope. Inside, a grainy photo of a soaked alley, dated years ago. On the back, 3 words scrawled in red. "Do you remember?" Adrian's pulse spiked. He glanced at Elena. "We're leaving," she said softly, already pivoting him away from the crowd. No panic, no anger, only calm force. In the elevator, the photo trembled between his fingers. He looked up. "I think I've seen you before." Elena met his gaze, warm eyes steady. "In another life, maybe." The elevator chimed. Doors slid open to a private corridor, and a figure stepped from the shadow, blocking their path, a silver blade glinting in his sleeve. "Hello, rich boy," the man smiled. "Miss me?"
Elena moved before Adrian could blink. One hand shoved him back into the elevator, the other snapped toward the attacker's wrist. The knife clattered to the marble floor, but the man was fast, trained. He swung, clipped her shoulder, and the two crashed into the mirrored wall with a shattering crack. Adrian froze, breath caught in his throat. He'd sat across from billion-dollar rivals, stared down hostile takeovers, but nothing had ever made him feel this helpless. The doors were closing. He lunged forward and jammed them open with his hand, just as Elena slammed her knee into the man's chest, sending him sprawling across the corridor. Security finally thundered down the hall, subduing the intruder. But Adrian's focus was on her. Elena's ponytail had slipped loose, dark hair framing her face. Her breath was ragged, her suit torn at the seam, blood blooming through the fabric at her shoulder. She winced, but didn't falter. "You're hurt," Adrian said, reaching for her arm. "I'm fine," she replied, voice tight but steady. She shook free, as if his touch burned. "Fine?" His tone sharpened. "You just threw yourself in front of a knife. That's not fine." Her gaze snapped to his. For the first time, he saw a flicker, anger, fear, maybe both. "It's my job, Adrian. If you don't like how I do it, fire me." The words cut sharper than any blade. No one spoke to him like that. Yet instead of fury, Adrian felt something stranger. Admiration, curiosity, a pull he couldn't explain. Later, when she disappeared to get patched up, Adrian sat in his office, staring at the city but seeing only her. The way she moved, the scar he thought he glimpsed near her collarbone, the fire in her eyes when she told him off. Cracks were forming in his armor, and Elena Cruz was the one driving them deeper. What Adrian didn't know was that she wasn't just protecting his body. She was protecting a secret tied to the very night he thought he'd buried forever. Rain slicked the streets, neon lights bleeding across the windshield as Adrian's convoy cut through the city. He leaned back in the leather seat, trying to ignore the echo of Elena's words, "Fire me." But she hadn't walked away. Even now, she rode in the front, posture sharp, hand hovering near her weapon, as though danger were already in the car. The driver slowed for a turn. That was when Elena stiffened. "Keep going," she ordered. "What?" the driver asked. "Go, now." Her warning came too late. From the side alley, a black SUV roared forward, ramming into their flank. Metal screamed, glass shattered. Adrian's head snapped sideways as the car spun, tires shrieking against wet pavement. Bullets ripped through the night. Windows exploded into shards. Adrian ducked low, his pulse hammering, but Elena was already moving, slamming him flat against the seat, her body covering his. The deafening crack of her gun filled the cabin as she returned fire through the shattered glass. "Stay down," she shouted, voice fierce and unshakable. Adrian had never felt fear like this, raw, suffocating. And yet, beneath it, something else throbbed, awe.
She was a storm, every movement precise, fearless, as if she'd rehearsed this night 1,000 times. The SUV swerved, tires squealing, before peeling into the darkness. Sirens wailed in the distance as Adrian's remaining guards scrambled to regroup. The driver gasped, clutching a graze on his arm, but alive. Elena lowered her weapon, chest heaving. Only then did Adrian see the crimson seeping through her sleeve, staining the cuff of her suit.
"You're hit," he said, voice breaking. "It's nothing," she muttered, pressing her hand over the wound. But her face was pale, jaw tight with pain. Adrian reached out, his hand trembling as it closed over hers. "Don't tell me it's nothing. You—" His words faltered, tangled between gratitude and something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. For the first time, Elena's eyes softened, not with weakness, but with something dangerously close to vulnerability. She didn't pull away. Outside, sirens drew closer, but inside that ruined car, Adrian Black realized the truth. Elena Cruz wasn't just his bodyguard. She was his shield, and without her, he was already dead. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't possibly know, was that this wasn't the first time she had saved his life. The hospital room hummed with machines, sterile light pouring over white walls. Adrian paced like a caged animal, his suit jacket discarded, his tie hanging loose. He wasn't used to waiting, deals bent to his will, people obeyed his commands. But Elena Cruz was behind those doors, stitched and bandaged, and for the first time in years, he felt powerless. When the doctor finally allowed him in, Adrian entered quietly. She sat upright in bed, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, the harshness of her suit replaced by the vulnerability of a patient's gown. Yet her eyes were still sharp, still watchful. "You should be resting," he said softly. "I don't rest," she replied. He moved closer, unable to stop himself. "Why, Elena? Why would you risk your life for me like that? It wasn't just duty. I saw it in your face." Her jaw tightened, and for a moment he thought she'd push him away. Instead, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I've done it before." The words sank into him like ice. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes briefly, as if summoning strength. "Years ago, you were just a reckless boy in the wrong alley, cornered by men who wanted you dead. You don't remember me, but I was there. I pulled you out. I fought for you. I still carry the scar to prove it." Adrian's chest tightened. The nightmare that had haunted him, those fists, that shadowy savior, it wasn't imagination, it was her. His hand hovered, then settled gently on hers. "It was you." Elena turned her face away. "I never wanted you to know. Protecting you now is part of the same promise I made then, to keep you alive, even if it costs me everything." For once, Adrian Black had no words. The fortress around his heart cracked wider, and through it poured something dangerous, something he could no longer deny. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Adrian had never known. He attended meetings, reviewed contracts, shook hands with men who wanted pieces of his empire, but his thoughts drifted, always, to Elena. She was everywhere, standing at his side during press conferences, scanning exits at restaurants, her gaze sharp enough to slice steel. Yet beneath that armor, Adrian now saw what no one else could, the weight she carried. He caught himself watching her too long, the way her hair slipped loose in the wind, the way her jaw clenched whenever he stepped too close to danger. She wasn't just a bodyguard, she was his anchor. One evening, he found her alone on the balcony of his penthouse, the city glittering below. She stood without her jacket, arms folded, her long hair brushing against her cheek in the breeze. "You never sleep," Adrian said softly. "Neither do you," she replied without turning. He stepped closer. "You saved me once as a boy, and again as a man. Tell me, Elena, who protects you?"
Her eyes flicked toward him then, and for a heartbeat he saw it, the loneliness she tried so hard to bury. But just as quickly, her walls slammed back into place. "We can't do this," she said, her voice firmer now. "Do what?" "Blur the line." She shifted her gaze to the skyline. "I'm your bodyguard. You're my client. Nothing more." Adrian moved closer until the distance between them was barely a breath. "Is that what you really believe?" Silence stretched. The harm of the city below seemed to fade. Elena's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The air between them burned with everything they weren't saying. Then, suddenly, her phone buzzed. She stepped back sharply, breaking the spell. "Threat confirmed," she said quickly, her voice all business again. "They know your next move." Adrian's fists clenched. Whoever they were, they had just stolen a moment he wasn't sure he'd get back.
The following night, Adrian's boardroom gleamed with glass and steel, every director seated like vultures in designer suits. Adrian controlled the table with his usual authority, but beneath it all, tension gnawed at him. Elena stood by the door, silent but alert, her gaze flicking over every movement, every whisper. Midway through the meeting, Adrian's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "They know about tonight. Someone inside is leaking." His eyes narrowed. He scanned the table of men and women who had built fortunes on his name. Trust had always been currency, but now it was poison. After the meeting, Elena stepped beside him in the corridor. "You felt it too," she murmured. "Yes," Adrian said grimly. "The enemy isn't outside. It's sitting at my table." Hours later, as Adrian prepared for a charity gala, Elena's instincts prickled. The limo route was compromised. She rerouted the convoy, forcing them down a darker street. That was when the betrayal bared its teeth. 3 black cars cut them off, doors flying open, armed men pouring into the street. Gunfire erupted, bullets shredding the night. Adrian's guards returned fire, but it was chaos. "Move!" Elena barked, pulling Adrian out of the car just as a Molotov ignited the vehicle. The blast lit the sky, heat searing their faces as they dove behind cover. In the glow of the flames, Adrian's gaze locked on one of the attackers. Recognition stabbed through him. It was Marcus Hale, his own COO, the man he trusted with contracts, finances, his empire. Betrayal burned hotter than the fire around them. Elena dragged him toward an alley, her grip unyielding. "This isn't just business anymore," she shouted over the gunfire. "Someone close wants you destroyed." Adrian's chest heaved with fury and disbelief. The empire he had built on power and loyalty was crumbling from within. And now, with enemies closing in, only Elena stood between him and ruin. The safe house was dark, tucked into the city's forgotten edges. Adrian sat on a battered leather chair, his white shirt stained with smoke and blood from the ambush. His empire had been attacked, his trust shattered, and yet all he could see was Elena, pacing the room like a caged panther, her shoulder still bandaged from the knife wound she refused to acknowledge. "You should be resting," he said, voice hoarse. Her head snapped toward him. "Rest is for people who aren't hunted." He stood, moving closer. "You saved me again tonight. If it weren't for you, I'd be ashes with that car." Her eyes softened, just for a moment, before she looked away. "Don't thank me. It's my job." "No," Adrian said firmly, stepping into her space. "That's not why you did it. You don't throw yourself into fire, into bullets, just because it's a paycheck." His hand brushed her arm, hesitant, trembling. "So tell me, Elena, why?" She froze, breath shallow. The fortress she wore so well cracked under his gaze. Finally, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I've loved you, Adrian, since the night I pulled you from that alley. I swore I'd never let you see it. I swore I'd bury it. But every time I save you, it gets harder to breathe." The words hung between them, heavier than any bullet.
Adrian's chest tightened, his carefully built armor splintering at last. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "You carried this all these years, and I never knew." Tears shimmered in her eyes, though she fought them back. "It doesn't matter. You're my client. That's all I'm supposed to be." Adrian tilted her chin until she met his eyes. "You've been far more than that, Elena. You've been my savior, my shield, my second chance at life. And now, I don't want to live another day without knowing you're mine."
Dawn broke over the city, washing the skyline in gold. The night's chaos had ended, Marcus Hale in handcuffs, his betrayal exposed for the world to see. Adrian's empire stood shaken but not broken. He had survived, and more than that, he had seen the truth. Power and money meant nothing without someone worth protecting. In the quiet of his penthouse, Adrian turned from the window to face Elena. She stood tall despite the bandages on her arm, her suit jacket draped over a chair, long hair falling loose around her shoulders. Even wounded, she radiated strength. "You don't have to stay on duty," Adrian said softly. "Not anymore." Her eyes flickered, guarded as ever. "And leave you unprotected?" He stepped closer, taking her hand. "No. Stay, but not as my bodyguard. Stay as the woman who's saved me more times than I can count. Stay as my partner. In this life, in every fight, in everything that comes." For once, Elena didn't hide behind silence. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, rare and disarming. "You're stubborn, Adrian Black."
"And you love me for it," he said, daring to pull her closer. Her walls crumbled at last. Elena leaned into him, her forehead resting against his, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I do." The city hummed below, unaware of the battle that had been fought, the betrayals overcome, the hearts finally unguarded. For years, Adrian had been untouchable, a fortress of wealth and power. But in Elena, he found the one truth that mattered. Love wasn't weakness. Love was the strongest shield of all. Together they stepped onto the balcony, hand in hand, the first light of morning painting their future wide open. And for the first time in his life, Adrian Black felt invincible, not because of his empire, but because of her. The story had begun with danger. It ended with love. And that's the end of The Bodyguard's Secret. If you loved this story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. And leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Your support helps bring more cinematic stories to life. Until next time.